As you settle into your place of rest, allow your body to grow heavy and your thoughts to drift like leaves upon the water. The day has carried its noise, its movement, and its demands, but now you are invited to step into another rhythm, a slower, softer rhythm that belongs not to the daylight, but to the night. Breathe deeply, letting the air fill your chest before it slowly releases, as though the whole world itself exhales with you. Tonight, we will journey together into one of the oldest stories ever told, a tale whispered in temples and carved upon stone thousands of years ago. It is the tale of Osiris and Isis, of love, betrayal, death, and rebirth. But here, as you listen, it is not a tale of turmoil. It is a tale that gently carries you, like the river Nile in the cool hours of dawn, toward a place of peace, safety, and sleep. Imagine yourself lying beneath the quiet sky of ancient Egypt. The stars glitter above, scattered across the deep indigo expanse, each one shining as a watchful eye of eternity. A soft breeze drifts across the desert, brushing the sands and whispering secrets of forgotten ages. You hear the faint murmur of the Nile, its waters timeless, flowing steadily through a land of golden fields and towering temples. This river, eternal and patient, was the lifeblood of the Egyptian world, and it is here, beside its gentle banks, that we begin. The people of the Nile saw their gods not as distant and unreachable, but as present in every breath of wind, every harvest, every cycle of sun and moon. The gods lived among them in stories, and these stories gave shape to the mysteries of life and death. They explained the turning of seasons, the fertility of the soil, the inevitability of endings, and the promise of beginnings. To tell these stories was to touch the eternal, to find comfort in the idea that life flows onward, even when moments fade. And so, as your body sinks into the quiet of your bed, let this story become your gentle companion. The voice of the past is not hurried, not sharp, but lingering and soft, like the lap of water at the edge of a reed bed. There is no need for you to stay alert, no need for your mind to work hard. Simply listen, and if at any time your eyes grow heavy and your awareness begins to slip away, allow it. The story will keep speaking, flowing like a river even as you drift into dreams. The tale of Osiris begins in harmony, with a world touched by divine order. He was a king beloved by his people, a bringer of abundance and civilization. His sister wife Isis stood beside him, wise and devoted, a goddess of magic and motherhood. Together they embodied balance, the kind of balance every heart yearns for: love and duty, compassion and strength, life and renewal. Their story, however, would be shadowed by jealousy and chaos, by the restless presence of Set, the brother who could not bear to live in the light of Osiris' greatness. But before we wander too far into the trials and struggles, let us stay in this opening moment a little longer. Here, where the air is calm, where the earth seems steady, and where Osiris reigns as a just and noble figure. His reign was described as golden, an age when fields bore fruit and people lived with order and justice. Imagine him seated upon a throne of carved stone, draped in linen white as the moon's glow, his skin shining with the dark richness of the earth itself. Around him, the scent of lotus blossoms rises from the water, and the sound of music drifts from the temples, slow and soothing. Isis is there as well, radiant in her quiet strength. She is the gentle protector, the wise counselor, the healer who knows the secrets of herbs and the language of spells. Where Osiris brings life to the land, Isis brings life to the soul. Her devotion to her husband and to the people of Egypt is as unshakable as the steady course of the river. Together they form a union not just of love, but of cosmic necessity. For in Egyptian thought, balance was everything. To lose balance was to invite chaos, and to keep balance was to allow life itself to flourish. As you picture these scenes, let the details soften you. See the flicker of torches in the evening breeze, their flames steady but gentle. Hear the rustle of palms in the night air, their long fronds moving slowly, like the breathing of the world. Notice the cool touch of stone beneath bare feet, warmed by the sun through the day, now releasing its heat to the calm night. Each detail invites you deeper into this ancient world, but also deeper into your own relaxation. For this story, though filled with shadows and challenges, will never abandon you to unease. Every moment of tension will be softened by the reminder that this is myth, that it is safe, that it is old and familiar. Just as the Nile floods and recedes, so too do the trials of the gods rise and fall, always returning to a state of balance. You are not here to carry the burden of their struggles. You are here only to listen, to drift, to let the current of story lull you as night unfolds. And so, let the beginning be a lullaby in itself. Let Osiris and Isis stand before you not as distant deities, but as figures of harmony, reminders that love and devotion endure even against the strongest winds of change. Their names have been spoken for over 5,000 years, across deserts, temples, and tombs. Tonight, they are spoken once more, but softly, slowly, in a rhythm meant to soothe, to guide you toward rest. Close your eyes, if you haven't already. Feel the presence of the river flowing gently, endlessly, as the first chapter of this myth cradles you. We begin where all great tales begin, in peace, before the storm, in balance, before the fracture. And as this balance settles within you, let yourself drift, knowing that every part of the journey ahead will hold you in safety, in calm, and in timeless story. The river that gave life to Egypt was no ordinary river. The Nile was not simply water that flowed through dry land. It was the very breath of the gods, the pulse of the earth, the rhythm that determined the fate of an entire civilization. To understand the story of Osiris and Isis, we must first linger by this river, in the quiet hours of evening, and feel how sacred it was to the people who lived upon its banks. Close your eyes and imagine its surface, wide and endless, stretching farther than your gaze can reach. By day, its waters shimmered beneath the golden light of the sun, and by night, it reflected the starry heavens as though the sky itself had descended to rest upon the earth. The Egyptians believed the Nile was eternal, its source hidden beyond human knowledge, flowing from the realm of the gods into the world of mortals. Each year it flooded, and each year it retreated, leaving behind rich black soil that nourished their crops. To them, this cycle was not chance, nor accident. It was a divine pattern, a sacred promise that life would always return after hardship, that abundance followed loss, and that order arose even from chaos. As you listen, let yourself imagine lying beside that river in the cool of twilight. The reeds sway gently in the breeze, the air holds the faint perfume of lotus blossoms, and the songs of unseen birds drift across the still water. This was the setting of Egypt, a land where the earth seemed to breathe with rhythm, where people built their lives not in resistance to nature, but in harmony with it. Their fields, their harvests, their festivals, and their prayers all moved with the Nile's pulse, as if the land itself was alive. And because their lives were so deeply woven with the land, they understood the world through stories of gods. These gods were not distant rulers in some unreachable heaven. They walked among the people in myth and symbol. Every stalk of grain, every beam of sunlight, every gust of desert wind carried their presence. When the Nile rose, it was the tears of the goddess Isis mourning for her husband. When the desert winds howled, it was the breath of Set, raging across the barren sands. When the sun appeared each morning, it was Ra, sailing across the sky in his golden boat. To drift into the Egyptian world is to step into a tapestry where every element of life had meaning and every pattern had a voice. You might see the stars above as only points of light, but to the Egyptians, they were deities keeping watch, forming constellations that told stories of triumph, protection, and eternal cycles. You might hear the whisper of the wind, but they heard the murmur of spirits, ancestors, and gods guiding them toward balance. Let the rhythm of that thought soothe you now. Life was not random in their eyes. It was structured, ordered, guided. Even in loss, there was meaning. Even in endings, there was renewal. This is the frame in which the story of Osiris and Isis is told, not as a tale separate from the earth, but as a mirror of the very cycles the people witnessed year after year. And so, before Osiris ever appears upon his throne, before Isis ever whispers her spells, the land itself speaks. The desert stretches endlessly, silent and vast, its sands shifting like the ocean. The fertile valley hugs the river, green and generous, cradled in the midst of barrenness. Above, the sun reigns as a god in his own right, and when night comes, the sky reveals a river of stars flowing across the heavens, mirroring the Nile below. It was in this duality, desert and fertility, day and night, order and chaos, that the Egyptians recognized the dance of their gods. Imagine, for a moment, walking along the banks at dawn. The mist curls upward from the water, carrying with it the faint scent of silt and earth. Farmers move slowly, preparing to tend their fields, and priests stand at temple doors, raising offerings to greet the rising sun. It is a world both simple and majestic, where each action has ritual weight. For the Egyptians, to live was to honor the gods, and to honor the gods was to live. It is no surprise, then, that their greatest myths are interwoven with the Nile's rhythm. The story of Osiris is one such myth, embodying the cycles of death and rebirth that the river displayed each year. When the Nile receded, leaving behind fertile soil, it was seen as Osiris' gift, his promise that life would spring forth again. When the waters swelled and covered the land, it was like his death and burial, the moment when chaos seemed to take hold, only to be followed by renewal. The myth was not separate from daily life. It was daily life, given shape in the form of gods and stories. As you rest now, allow yourself to sink into that same rhythm. Just as the Nile rose and fell, so too does your breath rise and fall. Just as the people trusted the river to return, so too can you trust that rest will come, that sleep will rise up to cradle you. There is no need to chase it, no need to demand it. Like the Nile, it flows in its time, and you are already drifting upon its gentle current. The Egyptians built temples along the river, grand stone structures that have survived for thousands of years. Picture their columns rising high, carved with figures of gods, painted once in vivid colors that the sun has long since faded. These temples were places where myth was not just told, but lived. Priests chanted hymns, offerings were made, incense rose like prayers carried by the wind. In these sacred spaces, people felt themselves connected to something eternal, something larger than their brief lives. And now, through this story, you too are stepping into one of those temples. You are crossing the threshold of myth, entering a place where stone and star meet, where water and sand balance each other, where gods and humans share in the same eternal dance. So let us linger here, by the Nile, in the hush of evening. Let the calm of this ancient land seep into your imagination. See the torches flickering along the banks, their reflections dancing upon the water. Hear the croak of frogs and the distant call of birds settling into the marshes. Feel the coolness of night descending, carrying with it the promise of rest. This is the world in which Osiris and Isis lived, loved, and endured. Their story, which we will now begin to trace, is one of harmony shattered and then restored, of devotion that endures even against the weight of chaos. But for now, there is no need to rush toward the drama. For now, we simply rest in the setting: the Nile, the desert, the fertile fields, and the eternal sky. The world of Egypt is ready, waiting quietly, like the soft hush before a dream. The story of Egypt's gods, the story that holds Osiris and Isis within its embrace, begins not with them, but with the first breath of creation itself. The people of the Nile believed that before all things, there was only the endless darkness, the primeval waters known as none. It was vast, formless, and quiet, like the silence you feel when you close your eyes and drift at the edge of sleep. From this watery void, something stirred. A single spark of will, of creation, rose up and formed itself into the first god, Adam. Adam was the self-created one, born out of nothing, bringing light and form where there had been only shadow. He rose upon the first mound of earth that emerged from none, much like the Nile soil that rose after the floodwaters withdrew. Adam was both male and female, complete within himself, and from his breath and body came the next gods: Shu, the air, and Tefnut, the moisture. With air and moisture, creation gained balance. The first cycle had begun. Imagine the quiet rhythm of this tale as if it were unfolding before you. The dark waters still stretch endlessly, but now a mound of land glimmers faintly, and upon it stands Adam, radiant and serene. From him flows Shu, who is the light breeze against your face, the gentle breath filling your lungs. From him comes Tefnut, who is the cool mist that clings to the morning, the drop of water upon a leaf, the quiet nourishment hidden in the air itself. Together they drift outward, beginning the dance of creation. Shu and Tefnut, in their union, brought forth Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. Geb lay beneath, his body the fertile ground, his skin rich with life and promise. Above him arched Nut, her form stretching across the heavens, her body scattered with stars. They were deeply in love, so much so that they clung together endlessly, earth and sky refusing to part. But Adam, the first god, saw that creation needed space. Shu, the air, gently separated them, lifting Nut high above and pressing Geb down below, so that the world might have a place to breathe, a place where life could grow between earth and sky. It is here that the great family of gods began to take shape. From Geb and Nut came 4 children, each destined to play a role in the eternal drama. The first was Osiris, noble and just, destined to bring order and fertility. Beside him came his sister Isis, wise and powerful, keeper of magic and devotion. Then came Set, fierce and wild, the embodiment of storms and disorder. And last came Nephthys, the quiet one, often overlooked, yet carrying within her both mystery and loyalty. In the Egyptian way of seeing, these were not just stories of gods, but truths about the world. Osiris was more than a god. He was the fertility of the earth, the abundance of crops, the order of kingship. Isis was more than a goddess. She was the mystery of healing, the quiet strength of love, the mother's devotion that protects and restores. Set was not simply chaos. He was the desert winds, the barren sandstorms, the necessary challenge that tests and reshapes. And Nephthys, though quiet, embodied the hidden spaces of night, the unseen currents that move beneath the surface of life. Let these figures appear slowly in your imagination, not as loud or overwhelming, but as calm presences drifting into a dream. Picture Osiris, tall and serene, his skin the deep black of fertile soil, a crown upon his head, a crook and flail in his hands. See Isis beside him, radiant, her headdress shaped as a throne, eyes steady with wisdom, her hands open in healing. Set stands apart, his figure strong, his face strange. Some said it was the head of a desert beast unknown to man. Around him coils an energy not of peace, but of restless stirring. Nephthys hovers in the background, wrapped in shadow, her presence subtle, her loyalty hidden but enduring. This divine family was more than a collection of names. To the Egyptians, they were the cycle of life itself. Osiris brought life, Set brought challenge, Isis brought restoration, Nephthys brought mystery. Together, their interactions explained why the world contained both harmony and struggle, both fertility and drought, both love and betrayal. And as you listen, notice how this story, though vast and ancient, moves in a rhythm much like your own breath. The balance of opposites, the interplay of forces, they mirror the balance within you, the way your body shifts between wakefulness and sleep, between tension and release. Just as the gods shaped the world by separating earth and sky, you too are finding a separation now, a gentle lifting away from the cares of the day, making room for the dream world to emerge. The myth tells us that Osiris, from the moment of his birth, carried the promise of order. He would one day rule not just as a god, but as a king among men. His destiny was to bring civilization, to teach humanity the ways of farming, of justice, of ritual. He was to be the figure who stood for harmony, the one who reminded the world that life could be abundant if tended with care. His sister Isis was bound to him in love, not just as companion, but as an equal, a partner whose magic made possible what seemed impossible. Yet in this same family, Set seethed. Born from the same parents, shaped by the same divine forces, he embodied the restless, destructive side of existence. He was not evil, not in the way later stories might describe him. He was necessary, the challenge that prevented life from becoming stagnant, the disruption that forced renewal. But for Osiris, who sought harmony, Set would become both rival and undoing. And Nephthys, quiet, veiled in shadow, lingered at the edge of this tale. She was wife to Set, but her heart leaned toward Isis and Osiris. She would become, in time, a helper to Isis, a witness to grief, and a companion in the long search to restore what had been lost. This was the divine family: Adam the first, Shu and Tefnut the breath and the mist, Geb and Nut the earth and the sky, and their children, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. Through them, the Egyptians explained the world, not in dry words, but in living, breathing presence. Each god was a force, each relationship a reflection of the cycles of nature and the patterns of human life. So now, as we prepare to follow Osiris into his reign, let this family linger in your imagination. Let them stand like figures in a dream, etched not in stone but in starlight. Picture their forms gently glowing against the backdrop of the night sky, each one holding their place, each one a thread in the tapestry of creation. This is the family from which our story flows, and as we drift deeper, we will see how their bonds of love and rivalry shape the fate of gods and mortals alike. For now, let their presence soothe you. They are not far, these ancient figures. They are close, whispering still through the rustle of reeds, through the hush of desert winds, through the timeless current of the Nile. And as their story unfolds, you may let go of your own story for tonight. You may rest, knowing that in this ancient family, balance will be sought, even when broken, and renewal will always follow loss. The reign of Osiris was remembered as a golden age, a time when the earth was generous and the people thrived beneath his just and gentle hand. To imagine his rule is to imagine a world in harmony, where the rhythms of nature and the rhythms of human life moved as one. Let us step slowly into that vision now, as though we were walking through a dream, each detail arriving softly, each image settling into place like sand drifting down to the riverbed. Osiris was not simply a king seated upon a throne of stone. He was the embodiment of fertility, the richness of soil after the flood, the patient growth of grain beneath the sun, the promise of life sustained. His skin, described in legend as dark like the earth, reminded the people of the fertile silt left behind by the Nile. He was life itself, clothed in the garments of a ruler, crowned with the white crown of Upper Egypt, carrying the crook and flail, symbols of kingship and nurture. He was not a ruler who ruled by fear, but one who ruled as a shepherd rules his flock, guiding, protecting, ensuring abundance. The myth tells us that under Osiris' reign, the people of Egypt learned to farm, to sow their crops in harmony with the flooding of the Nile, to gather harvests that would feed them through the year. He taught them the rhythms of the land, how to work with nature rather than against it. He gave them laws, not harsh decrees, but gentle instructions that bound communities together, ensuring fairness and justice. In his presence, people learned not only to live, but to live well, to live with respect for the order of the world. Close your eyes and picture this reign. Fields stretch in every direction, golden with ripening grain. The river glimmers in the distance, its waters calm beneath the afternoon sun. Villagers move slowly between their homes and fields, their work steady, their laughter soft, their songs rising into the air as hymns of gratitude. Life was not perfect, for life is never without struggle, but there was balance, and balance is enough to make the world feel whole. Isis stood at Osiris' side, not behind him, for her role was equal in weight, though different in form. She was the queen whose wisdom guided him, the goddess whose magic wove protection and healing into the land. If Osiris was the order of the earth, Isis was the breath of spirit, the invisible strength that made order possible. Together they embodied the sacred union of male and female, king and queen, matter and spirit. Their partnership was a living symbol of balance, a reminder that harmony is never born of one force alone, but of two in union, complementing, sustaining, restoring. When the people honored Osiris, they honored not only a king, but a way of life. They saw in him the pattern of the Nile, the cycle of sowing and reaping, the eternal return of life after loss. They saw in Isis the mystery of renewal, the quiet force that whispers to the weary heart, all is not lost, life will return. Together they reassured their people that the order of the cosmos, called Ma'at, was not fragile, but enduring. And so the age of Osiris was remembered with longing. Festivals were held in his honor, rituals performed to keep his presence alive. In the temples, priests spoke his name in hymns, describing his generosity, his justice, his eternal care. They told of a king who did not hoard wealth or power but shared it, who did not divide his people but united them beneath a vision of peace. Let yourself rest in this image for a while. Imagine walking through the fields in the glow of twilight, when the day's work is done and the air begins to cool. The sound of laughter drifts from the village. Children's voices mingle with the call of birds returning to their nests. The temple stands nearby, its walls carved with figures of Osiris and Isis, their images painted in colors that glow even in the fading light. A sense of safety wraps around you. Safety not because danger does not exist, but because order and love are stronger than disorder. In Egyptian thought, this reign of Osiris was not only history, but myth made living. It was not simply about a king who once ruled. It was about the eternal possibility of harmony, the reminder that even in a world of change and challenge, balance can be found. The reign of Osiris was a story of what life could be when people aligned themselves with the rhythms of nature, when they lived in respect for the gods, and when justice was honored. The people of Egypt would have felt this reign not as distant, but as close, as intimate as the soil beneath their feet. When they planted seeds, they remembered Osiris. When the floodwaters receded, they saw his blessing. When they shared bread at their tables, they tasted his generosity. In this way, Osiris was not a figure far removed from their lives. He was present in their every act, their every breath, their every season. And yet, in the stillness of this golden age, a shadow lingered at the edges. For every balance has its counterbalance, and every harmony has its test. Set, the brother of Osiris, looked upon this reign not with gratitude, but with envy. Where Osiris was order, Set was disorder. Where Osiris brought fertility, Set embodied the desert, barren and harsh. The harmony of Osiris' reign cast Set further into shadow, and the shadow grew restless. But for now, let us remain in the light. Let us hold on to the peace of this reign, the calm of a land at rest. Imagine yourself as one of those villagers, standing at the edge of the river as the stars appear overhead. You have worked, you have eaten, you are safe. The world is balanced. In the hush of night, you whisper a prayer of thanks to Osiris and Isis, knowing that tomorrow, life will continue, steady and abundant. This was the reign of Osiris, not a reign of conquest, not a reign of fear, but a reign of harmony. It was a reign that embodied the very essence of Ma'at, truth, justice, order, and balance. And though the shadow of Set waited, those storms gathered at the edges, this moment was remembered as golden, a time when earth and sky, gods and humans, moved together as one. Let that thought settle into you now. Let the peace of Osiris' reign become the peace of your own rest. Just as the Nile flowed steadily, carrying life in its waters, so too does your breath flow steadily, carrying you toward the shores of sleep. Nothing need disturb you here. You are in the age of balance, the golden age of Osiris, and you may rest in its embrace for as long as you wish. But where light shines, shadow lingers. Where harmony is strong, there will always be forces that push against it. In the golden age of Osiris, when fields ripened under the sun and the Nile carried its steady blessing, one figure stood apart, restless and unfulfilled. This was Set, the brother of Osiris, born of the same divine family, yet carrying within him a different essence, not of fertility, but of barrenness, not of balance, but of disruption. Set was the desert itself, vast, fierce, unpredictable. His domain was the red land beyond the fertile Nile Valley, where sandstorms howled and nothing could easily grow. He was the roar of thunder over a barren plain, the sudden storm that scatters what was carefully tended. To the Egyptians, Set embodied a necessary truth, that life is never without challenge, that chaos must exist alongside order. Yet in this story, in the shadow of Osiris' reign, Set's nature would twist into envy, and envy into betrayal. Imagine him now, standing at the edge of the flourishing fields, watching as the people sang hymns to Osiris and Isis. He hears their laughter, sees their harvests, feels their gratitude directed not toward him, but toward his brother. The more abundant the land became, the more barren Set felt. The more harmony Osiris created, the more discord stirred in Set's heart. It was not enough for him to be the desert, the storm, the necessary darkness. He longed to sit upon the throne, to wear the crown, to claim the devotion that poured so easily toward Osiris. And yet, even in this envy, Set was not without complexity. He was strong, cunning, and filled with raw energy. The Egyptians did not see him as wholly evil. They knew that without him, there could be no testing of strength, no growth forged in hardship. But where balance was meant to hold, Set tipped too far. His jealousy became a fire that burned without end, consuming any thought of kinship, any bond of brotherhood. Let your imagination rest with him for a moment. See the desert stretching around him, endless dunes beneath a burning sky. The wind tears across the sand, lifting it in spirals that sting the eyes and cloud the air. This is his realm, harsh and unforgiving. And in his heart, the desert grows louder, echoing his resentment, urging him to act. He looks toward Osiris and sees not a brother to be honored, but a rival to be undone. Yet even here, in the telling of Set's jealousy, let the tone remain soft, as though spoken through a dream. For this is not a tale meant to frighten but to soothe, to remind us that even in stories of betrayal, there is rhythm, and in rhythm there is rest. The envy of Set unfolds slowly, like the lengthening of shadows at dusk. It is not sudden, not abrupt, but gradual, creeping in like a whisper across the sands. The myths tell us that Set's discontent grew year by year. He watched Osiris festivals, where priests raised offerings, where people sang praises, where joy filled the land. He compared the love Osiris received to the emptiness of his own realm. And though Nephthys, his wife, remained by his side, her heart often leaned toward her sister Isis, leaving Set further isolated. He felt himself outside the harmony, a figure necessary but uncelebrated, powerful but unloved. In time, his thoughts sharpened into desire. The desire to unseat Osiris, to claim his throne, to remake Egypt in his own image. He dreamed of silencing the songs of harvest, replacing them with the howling winds of the desert. He longed to scatter what Osiris had gathered, to break what Isis had healed, to turn balance into chaos. His envy was no longer just a feeling. It became a plan, a hunger that would not rest until satisfied. And yet, as you listen, let yourself notice the gentleness in which the story unfolds. There is no need to rush toward the storm that Set will bring. For now, it is enough to see him standing in shadow, his eyes fixed upon Osiris, his heart restless. The story moves forward like the river, steady and unhurried. Even as betrayal brews, the night remains calm, your breath steady, your body sinking deeper into rest. The Egyptians told this story not only to explain betrayal, but to remind themselves that even gods face imbalance. Even divine families struggle with rivalry, jealousy, and loss. It was a way of saying, what we feel, they too have felt. What we endure, even the gods have endured. In this way, the myth comforted them, assuring them that chaos was not a curse upon humanity alone, but a force woven into the fabric of creation. Set, for all his envy, was still a part of the greater whole. Without him, there could be no renewal. Without his disruption, there could be no restoration. But this understanding came later. In the moment of the myth, as his jealousy grew, Set's actions would bring sorrow, mourning, and trials beyond imagining. And yet, just as the Nile floods only to leave behind fertile soil, so too would Set's chaos lead eventually to renewal. The story reassures us that even in envy and betrayal, balance waits to be restored. So as you rest in this chapter of the tale, do not let the figure of Set disturb you. Let him stand quietly in your mind, a reminder that shadow is part of the whole, and that no shadow can last forever. Picture him now, receding into the desert night. The stars above shine as they always have, indifferent to his envy. The Nile continues its steady flow, carrying life to the fields. In the village, laughter drifts on the breeze, children sleep in their homes, and Isis and Osiris reign in harmony. For the moment, balance holds. Set waits, yes, but the night is still calm, and in the calm you may rest. Set's envy, long simmering like embers hidden beneath the sand, began to take form. Jealous thoughts alone could not satisfy him. They had to become action. And so, in the stillness of his desert realm, Set began to imagine a plan. It would be a plan both cunning and cruel, a scheme that would mask its malice in the guise of celebration. His mind, sharp as the edge of flint, turned again and again upon the thought. How could Osiris, beloved and strong, be undone? The answer, the myth tells us, came to him in the shape of a coffin. But this was no ordinary coffin of wood or stone. This would be a vessel of beauty, gleaming with gold, inlaid with precious gems, designed not to frighten, but to dazzle. It would be a gift that seemed generous, even divine. Yet hidden within its beauty lay the seed of betrayal. Set ordered the coffin to be made with great care, each measurement precise, each detail exact. The shape was no accident. The coffin was built to the dimensions of Osiris himself, crafted so perfectly that no other body could fit within it. It was a trap disguised as a treasure, a snare woven into celebration. To those who looked upon it, it would appear as a marvel. To Osiris, it would appear as a curiosity. But to Set, it was the key to his brother's downfall. Close your eyes and picture it. The coffin shining in torchlight, its golden surface glowing with warmth, the gems catching fire as they reflected the flickering light. It seemed a gift fit for a king, yet its beauty concealed its purpose. Even in myth, beauty and danger are often twined together, reminding us that what glitters may not always bless. When the coffin was ready, Set devised the stage upon which his plan would unfold. He would hold a grand feast, a gathering filled with music, wine, and laughter. He would invite nobles, dignitaries, family, and, of course, Osiris himself. The feast would be a celebration of kinship, a night of joy, or so it would seem. But behind the smiles and songs, betrayal waited in silence. Imagine now the night of the feast. The halls glow with lamplight, shadows dancing across the painted walls. Tables are heavy with food, roasted meats, honeyed cakes, bowls of figs and dates. The scent of incense fills the air, mingling with the fragrance of flowers woven into garlands. Musicians play soft melodies on lyres and flutes, their notes rising like whispers into the night. Guests recline, laughter echoing, wine flowing. It is a night of harmony, or so it appears. And in the center of it all stands the coffin. Guests marvel at its beauty, touching the smooth gold, admiring the way it gleams as though lit from within. Some whisper of its craftsmanship, others speculate about its value. To them, it is a wonder, a symbol of generosity. Only Set knows its secret. He watches from the shadows, his eyes fixed upon Osiris, waiting, patient as the desert itself. At last, the moment comes. Set rises, his voice smooth, his tone playful. He suggests a contest, a game to delight the guests. Let each person try the coffin, see who among them might fit. Laughter ripples through the hall. One by one, the guests approach. They lie down within, only to find it too long or too short, too wide or too narrow. Each attempt brings more laughter, more merriment. The game appears innocent, nothing more than a diversion on a festive night. And then it is Osiris' turn. Smiling, perhaps even curious, he steps forward. The guests watch in anticipation. He lowers himself into the coffin, stretching out his body. And as the myth tells us, it fits him perfectly. The guests gasp at the marvel, their surprise ringing through the hall. Osiris, ever trusting, ever open, does not see the danger. He lies within the coffin as though upon a bed of rest, unaware that betrayal hovers close. In that instant, Set gives the signal. His followers rush forward, slamming the heavy lid shut. The sound echoes like thunder in the hall. Bolts are fastened, nails driven in, molten lead poured to seal the coffin tight. What had seemed a game becomes a prison. Laughter dies, replaced by shock. The hall that moments ago rang with music now trembles with silence. Set's heart races, his plan complete. The coffin, gleaming and terrible, now holds Osiris captive. Without pause, Set orders it lifted, carried out into the night, and cast into the Nile. The waters close over it, carrying the coffin away, away from the feasting halls, away from the land Osiris had ruled with justice. The river swallows it whole, as though hiding the act of betrayal beneath its dark surface. Let the image settle gently in your mind. The coffin drifting on the currents, the moonlight gleaming upon its golden lid, the the river carrying it silently into the distance. It is a sorrowful image, but also a dreamlike one, soft and slow, like watching a boat drift endlessly downstream. The betrayal is real, yet the telling is calm, for even in the loss, the story assures us that renewal will come. The guests, stunned, whisper among themselves, their hearts heavy with grief and fear. They had witnessed a king's downfall, a brother's treachery, yet they could do nothing. For the deed was done, and Osiris was gone. Set stood triumphant, his envy satisfied, his throne now within reach. And yet, even in triumph, the desert wind howled. For no act of betrayal can bring peace to the betrayer. As you rest in this part of the tale, let yourself drift with the coffin upon the Nile. Imagine the gentle rocking of the waters, the steady current carrying you forward. The stars overhead are constant, the night air cool, the world hushed. Though the story carries sorrow, it carries you also into stillness, into the flow of the river, into the rhythm of sleep. The Egyptians told this story not only to speak of betrayal, but to remind themselves of trust. How it can be both beautiful and fragile, how even the noblest can be deceived. Yet they also told it to remind themselves that life, like the Nile, always continues. What is cast into the water is not lost forever. What is sealed away may yet return. And so the coffin drifts on, carrying Osiris, carrying the weight of Set's betrayal, carrying the sorrow of Egypt. But it also carries the promise of the story yet to unfold, the search, the mourning, the love of Isis that will not rest. For an Egyptian thought, no ending is truly an ending. Every loss is the beginning of renewal. Every descent the path toward rising again. Let that thought guide you now into quiet rest. The coffin drifts silently, the river whispers its lullaby, and the stars wheel slowly overhead. Nothing is hurried, nothing is loud. All moves at the pace of eternity, calm and unbroken. So too may your breath flow, calm and unbroken, carrying you deeper into peace. When the coffin was carried away by the Nile, the world of Egypt shifted. The golden age of Osiris, so full of balance and peace, dissolved like mist beneath the morning sun. The people mourned in silence, for their beloved king was gone. Yet none mourned more deeply than Isis, his faithful queen, whose heart was bound to him not only by love but by destiny. The myth tells us that when Isis heard of Osiris' fate, her grief was vast and uncontainable. She tore at her garments. She wept until the earth seemed to weep with her, and her cries echoed like the lament of doves at dawn. She was not only a goddess, but also a wife, a partner, a soul entwined with another. The loss of Osiris was the loss of her other half, the breaking of a bond that had shaped the balance of the world. Yet Isis' grief did not crush her into despair alone. It moved her to action, for Isis was more than sorrow. She was magic, devotion, and strength. In Egyptian thought, she embodied the power of persistence, the love that endures even through death. She resolved that Osiris would not be abandoned to the waters, nor left in the grasp of Set's treachery. She would search for him, no matter how far the river carried him, no matter what dangers stood in her path. Close your eyes and picture her now, setting forth on her journey. The night sky stretches above her, filled with stars that guide her way. The Nile winds beneath her feet, carrying its slow current toward the sea. She moves along its banks, calling out Osiris' name, her voice soft but unyielding. The reeds bend as though listening. The night birds cry in answer. The wind itself seems to carry her sorrow. This was the devotion of Isis, tireless, unwavering, filled with love so deep it defied even death. The Egyptians told of Isis wandering far, disguised at times as a simple woman, at times revealing herself as the radiant goddess she truly was. In her search, she crossed villages and deserts, fields and marshes, asking all she met if they had seen a coffin of gold drifting upon the waters. Her grief made her vulnerable, yet her purpose made her strong. For every tear she shed, she also gathered resolve. The world responded to her sorrow. The people who met her offered kindness. Some gave her food, some gave her shelter, some whispered what they had seen. A gleaming coffin floating past, carried further and further toward the great sea. Nature, too, seemed to aid her. The winds calmed to guide her boat. The river bent its flow as though yielding to her will. Even the gods looked down and took pity, for Isis' devotion shone brighter than envy, brighter than betrayal. Let yourself imagine her search as though you are drifting beside her. The night is calm, the stars endless above. The Nile stretches like a ribbon of silver, its surface rippling with moonlight. Her voice rises softly as she sings spells of protection, words of magic woven into the air. They are lullabies as much as incantations, soothing and powerful, carrying her forward, carrying you deeper into rest. And yet, her journey was not without trial. Set's act had thrown the world into imbalance, and chaos stirred around her path. There were whispers of danger, of those who would hide the coffin or seek to claim its power. Isis pressed on regardless, her heart unwavering, for she knew that love stronger than death could not be defeated, and that Osiris, though hidden, still awaited her. At last, her search carried her to a distant land, where she heard whispers of a wondrous tree that had grown taller and stronger than all others. The tale said that within its trunk, hidden at its heart, was a golden coffin, the very coffin of Osiris. The tree had risen swiftly, nourished by the presence of the god within it, as though nature itself sought to guard him, to wrap him in protection. The king of that land, seeing the tree's beauty, had ordered it cut and fashioned into a great pillar for his palace, never knowing what secret it contained. Imagine Isis arriving at this palace, weary from her journey, yet burning with quiet hope. She walks among strangers, her eyes drawn always to the great pillar that supports the hall. To others it is only wood, fragrant and strong. To Isis, it is the resting place of Osiris, the hidden vessel of her beloved. Her heart aches, yet it also lifts, for she has found him. The myth tells us she lingered in that land, serving the queen of the palace, concealing her divine nature while she plotted how to free Osiris. By day she tended to the queen's children with gentle care. By night she circled the pillar, embracing it, weeping against it, singing spells of longing and love. Her devotion filled the hall like incense, unseen yet unmistakable. And those who saw her, though they did not know her true name, felt her presence as something holy, something beyond mortal measure. At last, her identity could not remain hidden. Her magic revealed itself, her sorrow poured forth, and the truth of the pillar was known. The coffin of Osiris lay within, sealed by the tree, guarded by fate. With reverence, the king of that land allowed Isis to take the coffin, honoring her grief and her devotion. She had found her beloved at last, though he was still bound in death. Rest in that moment with her, the moment when loss turns into reunion, when the long journey finds its end. She kneels before the coffin, her tears falling upon its golden surface, her hands trembling as she traces its lines. She whispers Osiris' name, not as a cry of despair now, but as a promise. She has found him, and she will not let him go again. The story of Isis' search is more than myth. It is a reminder that love persists even when hope seems faint, that devotion endures across distance and darkness. For the Egyptians, it was also a story of resurrection. The truth that what is lost may yet be found, that what is hidden may yet return, that death itself can be overcome by the power of love and magic. As you listen, let yourself feel the rhythm of that truth. The search may be long, the night may be deep, but love carries on, guiding, sustaining, finding what was thought forever lost. Just as Isis found Osiris, so too can the heart find rest, the soul find peace. And so the coffin, hidden no longer, rests now in the arms of Isis. Her journey is not yet complete, for Osiris still lies within, silent and still, but she has reached him. She has proven that no betrayal can separate them, no river can carry him beyond her reach. Love has carried her across the world, and love will carry her further still. For now, imagine her sitting beside the coffin, the night around her calm, the stars wheeling slowly overhead. Her voice rises again in a soft hymn, a song of devotion and hope. The river flows gently nearby, the air cool and quiet, the world hushed in reverence. In this moment, nothing stirs but love. In this moment, Isis rests beside Osiris, and the story rests beside you. With the coffin at last recovered, Isis' grief shifted into determination. She had found her beloved, hidden within the golden vessel, and though his body lay still, she refused to surrender him fully to death. For Isis was not only a wife in mourning. She was a goddess of magic, a mistress of spells and sacred words, the very embodiment of life's secret power. And with that power she resolved to breathe life once more into Osiris, if only for a fleeting time. The myths tell us that Isis carried the coffin away from the palace that had sheltered it, bringing it into solitude. There, far from curious eyes, she could open her heart and her magic without fear of interruption. She was joined by her sister Nephthys, who, despite being Set's wife, loved Osiris as a brother and loved Isis as her own blood. The two sisters together became mourners and protectors, their voices rising in ancient laments that were said to be the first funerary hymns of Egypt. Picture the scene now, the coffin resting in a quiet place, perhaps in the shelter of tall reeds near the river's edge. The moon hangs above, pale and watchful, its light falling like silver upon the water. Isis kneels beside the coffin, her hands spread upon its golden surface, her tears falling like drops of rain. Nephthys stands beside her, her voice steady, chanting words of power. The air itself seems to tremble, as though the world listens to their grief and their magic entwined. Isis begins her spell. Her voice is soft, almost a whisper, but each word carries the weight of eternity. She calls upon the gods of heaven and earth, upon the spirits of air and water, upon the hidden forces that bind all life. She weaves her lament into magic, her sorrow into power, her devotion into command. Slowly, the golden coffin responds. A light seems to stir within it, faint at first, then glowing stronger, as though life itself hears her and rises in answer. The lid is opened, and Osiris is revealed. His body lies still, regal even in death, wrapped in silence. But Isis bends over him, her hands moving in circles of healing, her breath falling softly upon his lips. She speaks words no mortal could ever hear, words older than the Nile, older than the stars. She does not plead. She commands. For love had made her not only a mourner, but a force as unyielding as life itself. And then, as the myth tells us, Osiris stirred. His eyes opened, heavy with the weight of death, yet alight with the spark of return. His chest rose, drawing breath once more. The stillness broke, and in its place came wonder. The god of life, slain and sealed, breathed again. For a moment, Isis' love had triumphed over betrayal, over death, over chaos. Rest in that image for a while. Picture Osiris sitting up slowly, his form fragile but radiant, his eyes meeting those of Isis. She leans close, tears streaming, her heart overflowing with joy. In this tender reunion, they speak no words, for none are needed. Their love is the language, their touch the truth. After so long apart, they are together again. The myths say that in this moment, Isis conceived their son, Horus. From the brief return of Osiris' life came the promise of the future, the child who would one day avenge his father and restore balance to the land. Even in sorrow, life continued. Even in death, fertility remained. This was the mystery of Osiris and Isis, that from loss could come renewal, from endings could come beginnings. But Osiris' return was not complete. He could not remain among the living. The laws of the cosmos held firm. Once slain, he could not walk again as king upon the earth. His revival was temporary, a gift of magic, a breath against the tide of eternity. Soon he would descend again into the unseen realm, the Duat, where he would become lord of the afterlife, ruler not of the living but of the dead. Isis wept at this truth, yet she did not resist it. She had gained what she sought, not only reunion, but the seed of hope, the birth of Horus. She understood that Osiris' destiny was no longer to walk beneath the sun, but to reign in the hidden world, to judge the souls of the departed, to ensure that Ma'at, the balance of truth and order, would endure even beyond death. For a time, though, she allowed herself only the tenderness of their embrace. Imagine her resting her head against his chest, listening to the rhythm of his borrowed breath, her hand clasping his. Imagine Osiris gazing upon her with gratitude and love, knowing that through her devotion he had not been abandoned, that even in death he had been found. Their reunion was brief, but it was eternal in meaning, a reminder that love is stronger than loss, that devotion is stronger than despair. Let that thought soothe you now. Just as Isis' magic drew Osiris back from silence, so too can your breath draw you deeper into peace. Each inhale is life. Each exhale is release, steady and unbroken. You need not rush. Like Isis' spell, your breath is slow, patient, eternal. The Egyptians remembered this moment in ritual. Every morning song, every funeral rite echoed the laments of Isis and Nephthys. Every promise of rebirth in the afterlife echoed the revival of Osiris. For them, death was not an end but a passage, a doorway through which Osiris had gone, and through which all souls would one day follow. His revival assured them that beyond death lay life, and beyond loss lay renewal. So the myth tells us that Osiris, revived for a time, departed once more, but not into nothingness. He entered the Duat, the underworld, where he would reign forever. And Isis, though her heart ached, turned her devotion toward protecting the child she now carried, the son who would carry forward Osiris' legacy. The story was not finished. The cycle of betrayal, loss, and restoration had only begun. Rest with this moment as though it were your own. The reunion of Isis and Osiris, fleeting but profound, is like the dreams that come in sleep, brief, delicate, yet filled with meaning that lingers long after they fade. Just as Isis held her beloved for a little while, so too may you hold this story in your heart as you drift deeper into slumber. And so the scene closes. The coffin lies open, the night is still, and Isis watches her beloved return, only to depart once more. Yet she is not broken, for she carries his legacy within her, and she knows that though Osiris now belongs to the hidden world, his presence endures. In the silence that follows, the stars shine overhead, eternal and calm as the love between Isis and Osiris. Though Isis had worked her magic and restored Osiris for a fleeting time, Set's shadow had not lifted. Envy and cruelty still burned in his heart, and when he learned that Isis had found her beloved and drawn him back, his fury deepened into something harsher, something desperate. It was not enough for Set to have cast Osiris into the Nile. It was not enough to have sealed him within a golden coffin. He wanted finality. He wanted to erase Osiris so completely that no magic, no love, no goddess could bring him back again. The myth tells us that Set discovered where Osiris' body was hidden. With rage guiding his hand, he tore the coffin open and dragged the body forth. What follows is among the most sorrowful moments of the story. For in his fury, Set did not merely hide Osiris. He struck at him again and again, rending his body into many pieces. Some say 14, others say 16, each fragment scattered across the length and breadth of Egypt. The act was not only violence, but insult, an attempt to break not only Osiris' form but the very memory of him, to divide what had been whole, to scatter what had been sacred. Imagine this scene in your mind's eye, not with fear, but with quiet distance, as though seen through the veil of a dream. Set, wild with jealousy, casting fragments into the river, into the desert, into the marshes, each piece falling into silence, carried away by water or swallowed by earth. It is a sorrowful vision, yes, but told here in hushed tones, softened by the knowledge that even in this darkest moment, the story does not end. For in Egyptian thought, no scattering was permanent, no loss beyond the reach of restoration. When Isis learned what Set had done, her grief was renewed, deeper and sharper than before. Yet again she wept, her tears falling upon the earth, and yet again she rose to action. Her devotion did not falter, even in the face of this cruelty. If her beloved had been divided, she would gather him again. If he had been scattered, she would bring him together. For Isis was not only a mourner, not only a magician, but a seeker. She would wander the length of Egypt, searching for each fragment, gathering her husband piece by piece, determined to make him whole again. Close your eyes and picture her search. The Nile flows endlessly, its waters carrying whispers of what it holds. The reeds bend in the wind, their shadows long upon the riverbank. Villages pass, temples rise in the distance, deserts stretch to the horizon. Through it all walks Isis, tireless and unyielding, her heart a beacon of love. She calls Osiris' name. She sings spells into the night. She asks the earth to yield up what it has hidden. Slowly, patiently, she gathers what was lost. With her walks Nephthys, loyal and loving, sharing her sister's grief. The two move together like twin stars, their voices weaving laments that soothe the land itself. The people who see them know they are in the presence of goddesses. They offer what help they can, telling of pieces they have seen, fragments they have found. Even the animals of the land seem to aid them, birds guiding their way, fish rising in the waters, the very earth shifting beneath their steps. Piece by piece, Isis gathers Osiris. Each fragment she lifts with reverence, cleansing it with holy water, wrapping it with linen, whispering prayers of renewal. Each piece becomes sacred, a part not only of Osiris but of the land itself. For the Egyptians, this scattering of Osiris across Egypt explained the holiness of many sites, each one a place where a piece of him had been found and honored. Thus, even in Set's cruelty, the land was made holy, bound together by the memory of Osiris. And yet, one piece was missing. The myths say that the phallus of Osiris, cast into the Nile, had been devoured by the fish that swam there, lost forever to the waters. Isis, though sorrowful, did not despair. With her magic, she fashioned a replacement, restoring her beloved as fully as she could. The loss became part of the myth, reminding the Egyptians that even the gods are not without wounds. Even the divine carry scars. When at last all the pieces were gathered, Isis and Nephthys worked together to reassemble Osiris. Their hands were steady, their chants unbroken, their devotion absolute. They became the first mourners, the first priestesses, their actions forming the pattern for the rites of burial and resurrection that Egypt would honor for all time. With linen they wrapped him, with oil they anointed him, with magic they restored him. And though he could not return to the throne of the living, he could be made whole enough to reign in the realm of the dead. Pause here and imagine the scene. The sisters working in silence, the air heavy with incense, the body of Osiris lying before them, once broken, now whole again. Candles flicker, their light warm and gentle. Outside, the Nile flows steadily, its voice a low lullaby. The night is calm, the stars steady, and within this calm the work of love and magic continues. Piece by piece, Osiris is restored, piece by piece balance is mended. The Egyptians understood this as more than myth. They saw in it the pattern of their own lives, their own deaths, their own hopes of renewal. Just as Osiris had been torn and restored, so too would every soul be broken by death, yet restored in the afterlife. The burial rituals they practiced, the careful wrapping of bodies in linen, the chants of the priests, all echoed the actions of Isis and Nephthys. Every funeral in Egypt was a retelling of this story, every tomb a promise that Osiris' fate would also be theirs, to live again beyond death. And so Set's cruelty, though deep, was not final. His scattering did not destroy Osiris, but instead gave birth to a story of restoration. His envy sought to erase, but it instead gave the world a myth of endurance. In trying to break Osiris, he made him eternal. In trying to silence him, he gave him a voice that would echo through ages. As you drift with this part of the story, let yourself feel the calm beneath it. The image of Isis searching, finding, restoring, is a gentle one, filled not with haste but with patience. Each step she takes is steady, each discovery quiet, each piece gathered with reverence. The rhythm of her search is like the rhythm of breath, in and out, loss and recovery, scattering and gathering, brokenness and wholeness. And so section 9 closes in stillness. Osiris, once torn, lies whole again through the devotion of Isis and Nephthys. Set has struck with fury, yet the sisters' love has prevailed. The coffin lies once more in a place of safety, the body within it whole, the story moving toward its next turn. The night deepens, the river flows, and the stars above shine eternal as the bond between Isis and Osiris. When Isis and Nephthys at last finished their work, Osiris lay whole once more, wrapped in linen and restored through love and magic. Yet though his form was reassembled, the truth remained unshaken. He could not walk again among the living as he once had. The laws of the cosmos, older than the gods themselves, decreed that the dead could not simply resume their former place. And so Osiris, though renewed, belonged to another realm entirely, not the sunlit world of fields and palaces, but the hidden, shadowed expanse of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. In this transition, the myth takes on its most enduring shape. Osiris ceased to be only a king upon the earth and became something greater, something timeless. He became lord of the afterlife, ruler of the realm beyond death, the one who would judge every soul and ensure that Ma'at, truth, balance, and cosmic order endured even after the body's final breath. In this way, death was no longer a terror. It was a journey, and Osiris was the guide who awaited all who passed through. Imagine him now, not broken, not still, but enthroned in the Duat. His body, once torn, now whole, shines with a subtle radiance. He wears the white crown of Upper Egypt, adorned with the tall plumes of rulership. In his hands, he holds the crook and flail, symbols of kingship and divine authority. His skin is often described as green in the ancient depictions, the color of renewal, of the fertile Nile, of life that springs eternal even after death. Around him, the Duat unfolds not as a place of terror, but as a vast and mysterious landscape, filled with winding rivers, starlit caverns, and fields of plenty. For the Egyptians, this vision was profoundly comforting. To die was not to vanish. It was to journey into Osiris' care, to stand before him in judgment, to be weighed upon the scales against the feather of Ma'at. Those who had lived with truth and balance would be welcomed into the field of reeds, a paradise where they would dwell in eternal peace. And those who had strayed would be swallowed by chaos, their names forgotten. Thus Osiris was not only a king but a guardian, not only a god of death but of justice, renewal, and eternal life. Isis understood this new role. She wept for her beloved, yes, but she also honored his destiny. She knew that though he was no longer with her in the world of sunlight, he was not lost. He had simply crossed into another realm, where his reign would endure forever. And within her, a greater task remained. For from her brief reunion with Osiris, a child had been conceived, Horus, the falcon-headed son who would one day rise to challenge Set and reclaim his father's throne. Picture Isis in these quiet days after Osiris' departure. She carries within her the seed of hope, the promise of renewal. She walks no longer in frantic search, no longer in grief-stricken desperation, but in patient determination. Every step she takes is careful, for she knows her child will need her strength. Every spell she whispers is for protection, for she knows Set's cruelty is not yet finished. She is a goddess of magic, yes, but she is also a mother preparing for the future, guarding the child who will embody justice and restoration. In some tellings, Isis goes into hiding, fleeing into the marshes of the Nile to shield her unborn son from Set's wrath. The papyrus reeds rise tall around her, offering shelter and secrecy. The waters ripple softly, carrying the songs of her spells. She is watched over by divine helpers. Thoth, the god of wisdom, lends her his knowledge. The 7 scorpions guard her from harm. In these quiet, sheltered places, the goddess of magic becomes the goddess of motherhood, awaiting the birth of the avenger. Meanwhile, Osiris takes his throne in the underworld. He is not alone there. The gods of the Duat surround him, assisting in the great task of guiding souls through their passage. Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of the dead, prepares the bodies and leads them to judgment. Thoth, the scribe of the gods, records the verdicts with his eternal pen. The 42 assessors of Ma'at stand witness, their voices carrying across the hall of truth. And at the center, Osiris presides, calm and eternal, the arbiter of balance. Imagine this hall, vast and quiet, its columns rising high like papyrus stalks, its floor shining with polished stone. In the center stands the great scales, one side bearing the heart of the deceased, the other the feather of Ma'at, light and perfect. Souls come forth one by one, trembling perhaps, but also hopeful. Their deeds are measured, their truths weighed. And Osiris, serene upon his throne, renders judgment not with cruelty but with fairness. He is the assurance that death is not chaos, but order, not despair, but continuation. For the Egyptians listening to this story, lying in their homes or hearing the hymns in temples, This image was not frightening. It was gentle. It was calming. It told them that their lives mattered, their choices endured, and their deaths would not erase them. Osiris, once slain, had become the promise that all could be renewed. His kingdom was not one of shadows alone, but of balance and eternity. And so we return to Isis, still on the earth, carrying within her the future. She knows her child will not only be her comfort, but the living continuation of Osiris' legacy. Horus will grow to challenge Set, to restore balance in the realm of the living, just as Osiris has secured it in the realm of the dead. The myth divides their fates, but binds them in meaning. Osiris rules the underworld, Horus will rule the world above, and Isis, steadfast, patient, devoted, bridges the two, the thread of love connecting them all. Rest here with this balance. Osiris in his hidden throne, Isis upon the earth, Horus yet unborn, Set seething in envy, and the world poised between chaos and order. The story is not yet finished, but it has settled for a moment into harmony. The broken king has become eternal, the grieving wife has become a mother, and the unborn son waits in silence, ready one day to rise. As you let these images rest in your mind, let them become as calm and steady as your breath. The duet stretches out like the quiet of night, eternal and deep. The Nile flows softly, carrying the promise of renewal. The stars shine above, as though watching both realms, the world of the living and the world of the dead, both bound by Osiris' presence. And you, listening now, are part of this flow, resting, breathing, held in the same gentle balance of order and peace. And so this chapter closes with Osiris enthroned as Lord of the afterlife, his judgment eternal and his presence everlasting. Isis walks in patience, preparing for Horus' birth, her love unbroken, her devotion unshaken. The world has shifted, the story has deepened, and yet the calm remains, steady as the night sky, eternal as the stars. The story moves now into one of its gentlest and most secret chapters, the birth of Horus, son of Isis and Osiris. It begins not in a palace, nor in a grand temple, but in the hidden marshes of the Nile, where reeds rise tall and thick, forming a shelter against prying eyes. For Isis knew that Set, still consumed by envy, would never rest until Osiris' line was extinguished. The child she carried was both hope and danger, the promise of restoration and the target of Set's wrath. And so, she chose concealment. She withdrew from the world of courts and cities, stepping into the embrace of the river's wild edges, where life grows quietly, hidden from sight. Picture those marshes now. The papyrus reeds sway gently in the breeze, their stalks tall and whispering, their tips brushing one another with soft sighs. Water glimmers between them, reflecting the moonlight in broken fragments, like silver scattered upon the surface. Birds nest among the reeds, their calls faint and distant. Frogs murmur, fish stir beneath the stillness, and the air is filled with the fragrance of water and earth. It is a place alive with quiet, a sanctuary woven from nature itself. Here, in this sanctuary, Isis prepared to bring her child into the world. She was not alone. Nephthys, her sister, remained by her side, ever faithful. The goddess Selkut, protector from venom and stings, lent her strength. The 7 sacred scorpions of Isis, guardians gifted by the gods, crawled silently at the edges of the marsh, their presence fierce and vigilant. Even the reeds themselves seemed to bow in protection, wrapping Isis and her unborn child in secrecy. The moment of Horus' birth was said to be quiet, veiled in the soft hush of night. No trumpet, no proclamation, only the steady rhythm of water against the reeds, the songs of crickets, and the whispers of Isis' prayers. And then, the cry of a newborn, fragile yet powerful, ringing out across the marsh like the first call of a falcon in flight. Horus, son of Osiris, heir to the throne, had entered the world. Isis gathered him in her arms, holding him close against her heart. She whispered to him promises of protection, of love, of destiny. She told him of his father, slain yet eternal, broken yet enthroned in the duet. She told him that one day he would rise to challenge Set, not only as her son, but as Osiris' rightful heir. Yet she did not speak of vengeance and anger. She spoke of restoration, of balance, of the return of harmony. In her embrace, Horus was not only a child of grief, but a child of hope, the living continuation of all that Osiris had been. But Isis knew the danger was not past. Set's eyes searched the land, his spies whispering in hidden places. If he discovered the child, he would strike without hesitation. And so Isis became not only mother but protector, weaving her magic around Horus like an invisible cloak. She sang lullabies that were also spells, her voice soothing her infant while commanding the winds and waters to guard him. She drew sacred circles in the sand, boundaries no harm could cross. She called upon the scorpions and spirits to form a shield of watchfulness. In her hands, motherhood and magic were one. There are tales that during Horus' infancy, dangers came close. Venomous snakes crept near, stirred by Set's malice. Scorpions crawled, their stingers poised. Even sickness touched the child, the weakness of mortality threatening him. But each time, Isis' devotion triumphed. With her spells, she drew out venom. With her prayers, she healed fevers. With her love, she shielded him from death. The people of Egypt, hearing these stories, believed that the magic Isis used to protect Horus was the same magic they could call upon in times of sickness. Even in later centuries, mothers whispered her words over their own children, invoking Isis' protection, her strength as a mother divine. Imagine Isis now, sitting in the marsh with her child asleep in her arms. The moon glows above, painting the reeds in silver. The water ripples softly, carrying away all sound. Her face is calm, though her eyes remain watchful. She rocks Horus gently, her voice low, humming the rhythm of an eternal lullaby. The air is heavy with peace, though the shadow of Set lingers beyond the horizon. Within this hidden place, mother and child rest in safety, the world of danger held at bay by love and vigilance. The Egyptians cherished this image. To them, Horus' survival was not only the continuation of a myth, but a reassurance for their own lives. The child god, fragile yet protected, mirrored every human child who faced the uncertainties of illness and danger. Isis' spells became their comfort, her protective motherhood their guide. They believed that just as Isis preserved Horus, so too she would preserve them and their families. In this way, the story of Horus' hidden birth became not just myth, but living faith. And so Horus grew, day by day, beneath the shelter of the marshes. His eyes, bright and sharp, watched the world with the gaze of a falcon. His cries softened into laughter, his fragile body into strength. He was nurtured not only by milk, but by magic, not only by love, but by destiny. Every day that passed brought him closer to the role he was born to fulfill, the challenge of Set, the restoration of balance, the rightful inheritance of his father's throne. But for now, he remained a child, and Isis remained a mother. The story paused in this moment of tenderness, allowing the listener to rest in its calm. The storm of Set's cruelty, the scattering of Osiris, the sorrow of loss, all these had led to this fragile, quiet scene. A mother, a child, the hush of the marshes, the whisper of reeds, the endless flow of the Nile. It is a scene of stillness, of safety, of hope waiting patiently to unfold. As you linger here with Isis and Horus, let the calm of the marsh settle around you. Let the reeds sway in your imagination. Let the water glimmer. Let the moonlight soften every edge. The child sleeps, the mother watches, and the night is unbroken. Just as Horus is safe in the arms of Isis, so too are you safe in this moment, held in the embrace of story and silence. And thus section 11 closes softly. Horus has been born, Isis has hidden him well, and Set's eyes, though searching, cannot pierce the veil of the marshes. The story rests for a time in this sanctuary, a pause before the coming struggles. For now, all is still, and the love of a mother guards the future of a god. Time in the marshes moved slowly, marked by the rising and setting of the sun, the endless flow of the Nile, the turning of the stars across the sky. In this hidden sanctuary, Horus grew from fragile infancy into a strong and watchful child. The marshes, with their swaying reeds and winding channels of water, became his first world, his school, his playground, and his refuge. Isis, ever watchful, guided him with tenderness and patience. She taught him not only how to walk and speak, but also how to see, to see the signs of the natural world, to understand the flow of water, the movement of stars, the language of animals. She whispered to him stories of his father, of Osiris who ruled in the hidden realm, of a throne that had been stolen, of a kingdom waiting for balance to be restored. She did not fill him with hatred, for her heart knew the danger of anger's fire. Instead, she nurtured in him the quiet certainty of destiny, the calm strength of one who knows he is the heir to a greater truth. Picture Horus in his youth, a boy with bright, piercing eyes like those of the falcon that would one day be his symbol. His gaze is sharp, his movements quick, his laughter echoing across the reeds like a bird's call. He runs barefoot through the shallows, the cool water splashing at his ankles, the sunlight painting his skin gold. He climbs among the papyrus stalks, stretching his arms wide as though they were wings. Already, there is something of the sky in him, a promise of flight, a promise of vision that sees farther than ordinary eyes. Yet even in this peaceful childhood, shadows lingered. Set had not forgotten his nephew. Though Horus was hidden from him, whispers of his existence reached Set's ears, stirring his envy into restless suspicion. He scoured the land with his servants, listening for rumors, sending eyes into every corner of the Nile. His heart could not bear the thought that Osiris' line might endure, that his own usurpation might one day be challenged. And so, while Horus grew in secret, Set grew restless in his power, a storm gathering beyond the horizon. Isis knew this. Her magic was strong, but it was her vigilance that shielded Horus most of all. She watched the signs, the shifting winds, the movements of strangers. She never let her son wander too far, though his spirit longed for freedom. She would take him into her arms and remind him, gently, that he was not only a boy but a seed of destiny, a child of both heaven and earth. Her lullabies were filled not only with tenderness, but with lessons, each note a reminder of who he was and who he would become. And Horus listened. Though young, he carried within him the calm patience of his mother. He grew to understand the balance she cherished, the harmony she sought to preserve. He felt his father's absence not as an emptiness, but as a quiet presence guiding him from afar. In dreams, perhaps, Osiris whispered to him. In the flight of birds above the marsh, he saw reflections of what he would one day be. The Egyptians told this part of the story not only as myth, but as reassurance. Horus' hidden childhood reminded them that destiny often begins in small, quiet places. Greatness does not always emerge from palaces or thrones, but from patience, from nurturing, from the gentle shelter of love. Just as Horus was raised in secret, so too they believed that every child carried within them a spark of the divine, a destiny yet to unfold. Still, Set's shadow pressed closer. There are stories of dangers that crept into the marshes during Horus' youth. Venomous creatures drawn by malice, sudden storms stirred by chaos, sickness that sought to weaken him. Each trial became a test, and each test revealed Isis' devotion. She healed him when poison touched him. She shielded him when storms raged. She sang over him when fever burned his body. And each time Horus survived, his strength deepened, his destiny drew nearer. Imagine Isis tending to her son during such a trial. Horus lies upon a bed of reeds, his breath shallow, his body trembling. Isis kneels beside him, her hands glowing with magic, her voice weaving spells older than time. Her tears fall upon his skin, cooling it like water upon fire. She calls upon Ra, the sun god, upon Thoth, the keeper of wisdom, upon every divine power that might lend her strength. Slowly, Horus' breath steadies, his fever fades, and he opens his eyes once more. The boy looks at his mother, and she smiles, weary but relieved. In her heart she knows, this child cannot be broken. These stories were repeated in Egyptian households for centuries. Parents whispered them over their children when sickness came, believing that Isis' words could heal through their voices. They saw in Horus not only a god but a reflection of their own children, fragile yet enduring, watched over by the same protective love. As Horus grew older, his awareness of his destiny deepened. He began to ask questions about his father, about Set, about the throne that had been stolen. Isis answered with patience, telling him the truth in gentle tones, never rushing, never pushing. She wanted him to grow not with bitterness but with balance, not with rage, but with resolve. She told him that one day he would face Set, and that the struggle would be long and hard. But she also told him that truth endures, that justice, though sometimes hidden, always returns. Rest with this image for a while. Horus, still a youth, sitting beside the water, listening to his mother's voice. The reeds sway, the stars shimmer, the Nile flows, and above them the sky stretches endlessly. Horus gazes upward, his eyes following the flight of a falcon, his spirit already reaching beyond the marshes, beyond hiding, toward the destiny that waits. This chapter of the story is gentle, filled with patience and quiet strength. It reminds us that even in hiding, even in secrecy, life grows. That greatness can be nurtured in silence. That the future can rest safely in the arms of love until the time is right. And so section 12 closes with calm. Horus, no longer a helpless infant, stands now as a youth of promise, his strength shaped by trials, his vision sharpened by destiny. Isis remains beside him, watchful and loving, her magic still the shield that protects them both. Beyond the marshes, Set's envy stirs, restless and uneasy, but here, for now, the boy grows, the mother watches, and the Nile flows eternal. The time of hiding could not last forever. Just as the Nile floods and then recedes, so too must secrecy give way to revelation. Horus, once a fragile infant hidden among reeds, had grown into a youth of strength and vision. His body was tall and sure, his eyes sharp as the falcon that was his symbol, his spirit restless with the knowledge of his destiny. The marshes had been his cradle, his refuge, his first kingdom, but he knew, as Isis knew, that they were not his final home. Isis had raised him with patience, with gentleness, but also with purpose. From the moment of his birth, she had whispered of the throne that had been stolen, of Osiris who now ruled in the unseen world, of the day when Horus must rise to restore balance upon the earth. She had shielded him from Set's envy, but she could not shield him forever. The boy had become a man, and a man cannot remain forever hidden. The time was drawing near when Horus would step beyond the marshes and claim the place that was his by right. Imagine the scene. The marshes stretching wide, reeds swaying, water glimmering under the sun. Horus stands upon the bank, tall and steady, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Behind him is the world of secrecy, of childhood and shelter. Before him lies the world of struggle, of destiny, of conflict with Set. Isis watches him, her heart torn between pride and fear. She knows he must leave, yet every part of her still longs to hold him safe. She places her hand upon his shoulder, her touch both blessing and farewell. But Horus is not alone in this moment. The gods themselves, seeing his readiness, draw near to guide him. Thoth, wise scribe of the gods, offers counsel, teaching him the laws of Ma'at, the truths he must defend. Ra, the sun god, whose falcon's flight crosses the heavens each day, lends Horus his light and strength. Even Osiris, though enthroned in the duet, sends whispers through dream and vision, steadying his son with the presence of a father who is never absent. The myths tell us that Horus, emboldened by this guidance, stepped into the wider world to declare his claim. No longer was he only the child of Isis, hidden from danger. He was the son of Osiris, heir to the throne, challenger to Set. His words carried weight, not in anger, but in truth. He did not shout with fury, but spoke with calm certainty. The throne belonged to him, and balance must be restored. Set, hearing of this, felt his envy boil into rage. For years he had ruled unchallenged, wearing the crown of Osiris, sitting upon the throne he had stolen. He had thought the line broken, the child extinguished, the legacy erased. But now, Horus stood before him, alive, strong, undeniable. And Set, god of chaos, could not endure such a challenge. His laughter was harsh, his words scornful, but in his heart he trembled, for he knew that the truth of Horus' claim was unshakable. The Egyptians saw this moment as the turning of the story, the point where concealment ended and conflict began. It was not yet battle, not yet struggle, but the calm before the storm, the moment when destiny reveals itself and can no longer be denied. They imagined Horus standing tall, falcon-eyed, his presence a living reminder of Osiris. To see him was to see the past restored, the cycle unbroken, the promise of renewal made flesh. For Isis, this was a moment of both triumph and sorrow. She had succeeded. Her child had survived, had grown, had become the man he was destined to be. Yet now he would step into danger, into the gaze of Set, into a struggle that would test not only his strength, but his spirit. She could no longer shield him as she once had. She could only stand beside him in faith, offering her wisdom, her love, her unbroken devotion. Imagine her voice in this moment, calm yet firm, as she speaks to her son. Remember, Horus, that strength without truth is chaos, and truth without strength is silence. You are both your father's heir and your own man. You will face trials, but do not let anger guide you. Let Ma'at, the balance of all things, be your compass. For only through balance will victory endure. Horus bows his head, listening. His heart is steady, his resolve unshaken. He knows the path before him will not be easy, but he does not fear it. For he carries within him not only his own strength, but the love of his mother, the guidance of the gods, and the legacy of his father. Pause here for a moment and rest with this image. Horus, stepping from the marshes into the world beyond, the reeds swaying behind him like the farewell of childhood. The sky stretches wide, the falcon soars above, the Nile flows eternal. Destiny has called, and he has answered. The Egyptians, hearing this story by lamplight, understood its meaning for their own lives. Every person, they believed, must step one day from the safety of youth into the challenges of the wider world. Every child must one day carry the legacy of their parents, the hopes of their ancestors, the weight of destiny, whether small or great. Horus was their mirror, their reassurance that truth, though hidden for a time, would always rise again. And so section 13 closes with quiet anticipation. Horus has left behind the shelter of secrecy. Isis, though watchful, allows him to step into his role. Set, restless and enraged, prepares to defend what he has stolen. The gods themselves lean closer, watching, guiding, ready for what is to come. The story moves now toward conflict, but even in this, the tone remains calm, steady, timeless. The Nile flows, the stars shine, and the rhythm of destiny unfolds. The moment Horus stepped out of hiding, the story began to shift into open struggle. Yet, in the world of Egyptian myth, battles were not always fought with swords alone. They were fought with words, with trials, with contests set before the gods themselves, as if the universe demanded that truth be tested in every possible way. For Horus and Set, the conflict was not only one of strength, but of justice, of who truly embodied Ma'at, the balance and harmony that sustained creation. When Horus declared his right to the throne of Egypt, the gods took notice. His claim could not be ignored, for he was indeed the son of Osiris, the child preserved by Isis devotion, the living heir to a stolen crown. Yet Set, quick to anger but cunning in argument, refused to yield. He strode into the halls of the divine council with his head high and his voice thunderous, insisting that his rule was just, that strength alone gave him the right to govern. Imagine this scene. The gods gathered in a great hall, Ra seated among them, Thoth with his scrolls ready to record, Isis watchful in her quiet strength, Nephthys lingering in sorrow, and Osiris listening from the unseen realm. Into this assembly came Horus, calm but resolute, and Set, blazing with defiance. The air itself seemed tense, as though the balance of the cosmos trembled upon their words. Set argued first, his voice fierce, his presence overwhelming. "I am the one who has ruled," he proclaimed. "I have worn the crown, held the scepter, commanded the two lands. Strength is the measure of kingship, and none are stronger than I. Horus is but a child grown too bold, untested, and proven. Would you hand Egypt to weakness? Would you let a boy sit where a god of storms has reigned?" But Horus answered with calmness, his voice steady, his words chosen with care. "I am no longer a child," he said. "I am the son of Osiris, born of his rightful queen, Isis. The throne was never yours to take, Set. You did not inherit it. You stole it. You did not build it. You seized it with treachery. Egypt does not belong to the strongest hand, but to the rightful heir. I claim not power for my pride, but balance for the land. Maat demands that the crown return to its true line. The council murmured, for each argument held weight. Set embodied strength, ferocity, and chaos, forces necessary in their own way. Horus embodied order, legitimacy, and justice, the heart of Maat. Which should rule? The gods could not decide at once. And so, trials were set, contests to prove who was most worthy to sit upon the throne. The Egyptians told of many such trials, some serious, some almost playful, as if even the gods understood that destiny is not decided in a single moment. One contest was of strength, where Horus and Set transformed into mighty beasts and wrestled in the waters of the Nile. Imagine the river churning, waves crashing as falcon and hippopotamus clashed beneath the surface. For days they fought, the struggle unending, the balance teetering. At last, the gods had to separate them, for neither would yield, and the contest ended without decision. Another trial was of cunning. The two were challenged to outwit one another, to see who could outlast the other in schemes. Set, sly as ever, attempted trickery, hoping to humiliate Horus. Yet Horus, taught by Isis' wisdom and guided by Thoth's counsel, met each scheme with patience and clarity. Though the stories differ in detail, the essence is always the same. Set tried to twist the rules, but Horus upheld balance. At times, the contests became strange, even humorous. In one tale, they raced boats along the Nile, but Horus built his from wood while Set, in arrogance, carved his from stone. The stone boat sank at once, and the gods laughed at Set's folly. These moments, lighter in tone, reminded listeners that even in the greatest struggles, pride can undo the mighty, while humility carries the day. But the trials were not only games. They were reflections of cosmic truth. Each contest showed the contrast between them. Set, the embodiment of chaos and brute force. Horus, the symbol of vision, legitimacy, and endurance. It was not enough to win by might alone. To rule Egypt was to embody balance, to hold together the order of creation itself. Isis played her part in these trials as well. Her wisdom, her cunning, her unshakable devotion to her son often tipped the scales. At times, she used clever tricks to expose Set's arrogance. In one story, she disguised herself as a humble old woman and approached Set, who boasted of his power and mocked Horus. Gently, she questioned him, drawing out his words until he revealed his own injustice. When she cast off her disguise, the council gasped, and Set's shame was plain. Yet, even when exposed, Set refused to yield. These trials stretched on for years, each contest prolonging the tension, each decision deferred. The gods themselves grew weary, unsure of how to end the dispute. Ra, the great sun god, often favored Set, for Set had defended him against the serpent of chaos in the night sky. Others leaned toward Horus, knowing his claim was just. The council wavered, balance hung in doubt, and the struggle became not just a quarrel between two gods, but a reflection of the eternal tension between chaos and order, strength and truth, storm and sky. For those who listened to these stories in Egypt's quiet nights, the meaning was clear. Life itself is a series of contests, of struggles between competing forces. Justice is not easily won. Truth must be tested, strength must be proven, balance must be fought for again and again. The trials of Horus and Set were not only divine myths, but mirrors of the human world, where families disputed inheritance, where rulers claimed thrones, where chaos always pressed against order. And so, as Section 14 draws to a close, we find ourselves deep in the rhythm of this myth. Horus has stepped forward, no longer hidden, his claim declared before the gods. Set, enraged, refuses to yield, insisting that power belongs to the strongest. The gods, uncertain, set trials to decide, and so begins a long series of contests, each one reflecting the eternal struggle of the cosmos. The story does not rush, for destiny never hurries. It unfolds slowly, trial by trial, like the flowing Nile, steady and unending. Rest now with this image, two figures standing before the council of the gods, one a falcon-eyed heir, calm and certain, the other a storming figure, fierce and unyielding. Between them lies Egypt, the land of the Nile, the two lands of Upper and Lower, the throne that symbolizes balance itself. Around them the gods watch, the stars shine, and the eternal story continues. The trials between Horus and Set did not end quickly, nor were they simple disputes resolved in a day. They stretched over years, unfolding like the slow passage of the Nile from source to sea, winding, meandering, never rushing. For the Egyptians who told these tales by lamplight, this drawn-out struggle reflected the rhythm of life itself. Justice does not always arrive swiftly. Truth is often tested again and again. And so the gods allowed Horus and Set to face one another in trial after trial, as if the very cosmos wished to weigh every side of their struggle. Some contests were of strength, others of cunning, and still others of endurance. Each one left the gods divided, their council unable to reach a final verdict. At times, Horus seemed the clear victor. At others, Set's raw power shook the heavens. Neither would yield, and the question of the throne hung suspended, unresolved, like the balance of a scale swaying gently but never settling. One tale tells of a particularly bitter contest, a wrestling match that shook both land and sky. Horus and Set transformed again, great beasts locked in combat. The waters of the Nile churned, the earth trembled beneath their fury. For days they struggled, neither one gaining clear advantage, until Horus seized his chance. With the sharpness of a falcon's beak, he struck and gouged out Set's testicles, leaving him weakened and humiliated. It was a blow not only to his strength but to his pride, for in Egyptian thought, fertility and potency were bound to power. Yet Set, though injured, did not surrender. In another version of the tale, he countered with treachery, blinding Horus in one eye, tearing from him the sacred eye that would later become the Wadjet, symbol of protection, healing, and the moon itself. Horus, maimed yet unbroken, cried out in pain, and Isis wept for her son. But Thoth, keeper of wisdom, came with his magic and restored the eye, making it even stronger than before. The story of this wound and healing became one of the most cherished symbols in Egyptian tradition. The eye of Horus, representing wholeness restored, health regained, balance rebuilt after loss. Through this contest, listeners understood a deeper truth. Power is not measured only by strength or fury but by the ability to endure, to be broken and yet return, to lose and yet be made whole again. Horus, in losing his eye, gained something greater, the wisdom of suffering, the strength that comes not from never falling, but from rising after the fall. Set, however, reveled in chaos. Even humiliated, even weakened, he did not step aside. Instead, he grew more defiant, more determined to hold what he had stolen. His laughter rang out like a storm, his rage stirred the desert winds, his presence remained like a shadow upon the land. Chaos cannot easily be defeated, for it finds new forms, new ways to intrude upon balance. The council of the gods grew weary of these endless contests. Ra, the great sun god, was often torn. He had long valued Set, for Set had stood by him in the nightly battle against Apophis, the serpent of chaos that threatened the sun's journey through the underworld. Without Set's fierce power, Ra himself might have been consumed by darkness. And so Ra hesitated, reluctant to strip Set of his authority, fearing that the balance of the cosmos might falter if Set were cast aside entirely. Other gods leaned toward Horus, seeing in him the rightful heir, the continuation of Osiris' line, the promise of restored harmony upon earth. But no single voice could silence the other. Thoth, ever the scribe and mediator, recorded each trial, each word, each judgment deferred. The scales of Ma'at wavered, never tipping fully in one direction. For Isis, these years were a torment of patience. She watched her son endure trial after trial, victory mingling with suffering, triumph shadowed by delay. She longed to bring the matter to a swift end, to see Horus crowned, to see justice restored. Yet she knew that even her wisdom could not rush the will of the gods. Each moment was a test not only for Horus but for herself, a test of faith, of endurance, of trust in the slow unfolding of destiny. There is a story that in one of these contests, Isis attempted once more to intervene. Seeing Set boastful and arrogant, she crafted a cunning trap, transforming herself and her words to ensnare him in contradiction. She might have succeeded, But Horus, grown proud of his own strength, grew impatient with his mother's interference. In anger, he struck her, cutting off her head in a flash of wrath. The gods were horrified, and Isis, though immortal, was restored with the head of a cow, a symbol of fertility and patience. This tale, troubling yet meaningful, revealed that even Horus, the champion of order, was not without flaws. He too could falter, lose his temper, harm even those who loved him most. It was a reminder that even gods must learn restraint, that even the just must struggle against their own impulses. Such stories gave the Egyptians comfort and warning. They showed that even the gods were not perfect, that mistakes and conflicts were part of existence itself. Yet, just as the eye of Horus could be healed, so too could bonds be mended, harmony restored, order reasserted. What mattered was not never failing, but always returning to balance. As the contest dragged on, the gods decided to move the dispute from earth to heaven itself. The trial was no longer about who could wrestle or scheme, but who could endure in the judgment of time. Ra decreed that they must continue until the council was certain, until Ma'at herself revealed who was most fit to rule. It was a test not of a single moment, but of endurance, of patience, of persistence against all odds. For the Egyptians, this eternal delay mirrored the rhythms of their own world. The Nile did not flood on command. The harvest did not ripen at once. Justice and disputes often lingered in courts, years passing before resolution. The myth of Horus and Set reminded them that patience is part of destiny, that truth must sometimes wait, and that balance, though delayed, always comes in time. Rest for a moment with this image. Horus, his eye once wounded but now restored, standing tall though weary. Set, scarred yet still defiant, his pride unbroken. Isis, watchful, her heart full of both sorrow and hope. Ra, conflicted, the council of gods uncertain. The throne of Egypt lies before them, gleaming, unclaimed, a symbol of order yet to be restored. The scales tremble, and the story stretches on. The struggle between Horus and Set had stretched across years, unfolding in waves of contest, trial, and argument. At times the battles were fierce, physical clashes that shook the earth and churned the waters of the Nile. At other times, they were quiet disputes of law and cunning, played out in the halls of the divine council. Yet through it all, the conflict left its marks. Neither Horus nor Set could escape unscathed, for the contest between order and chaos was not a fleeting quarrel. It was a wound that tested even the gods. Among the many tales of their strife, one moment stands out with special clarity: the injury of Horus' eye. In a battle against Set, fierce and relentless, the falcon god suffered a terrible wound. His left eye, the eye of Horus, was torn out, shattered beneath Set's violent hand. For a time, Horus stumbled, weakened, his vision dimmed, his strength shaken. The marsh-born youth who had grown into a warrior now felt the weight of loss, as though the sky itself had been dimmed. The Egyptians told this story not only as a moment of struggle, but as a moment of deep meaning. The eye of Horus became a symbol of vulnerability, of the cost of conflict, of the truth that even gods are not beyond suffering. Yet it also became a symbol of healing, for the wound was not the end of Horus' story. Isis, ever the healer, ever the devoted mother, turned all her love and magic toward restoring her son. Picture this moment in stillness. Horus lies weak after battle, his breath shallow, the wound upon his face grievous. Set has gone, his laughter echoing cruelly, but Isis kneels beside her son. Her hands, gentle yet filled with power, hover over his broken eye. She chants softly, her voice weaving spells older than time, each word a thread of healing, each tear a balm of devotion. She calls upon Thoth, the keeper of wisdom and medicine, to aid her. Together, Isis and Thoth restore what was broken. The eye of Horus, once shattered, becomes whole again, renewed with divine strength. This restored eye, known as the Wedjat, became one of the most powerful symbols in Egyptian thought. It represented wholeness, healing, and protection. The Egyptians believed that to wear the eye of Horus as an amulet was to carry with them the same protection and restoration that Isis had given to her son. It was more than a tale. It was a reassurance that what is broken can be made whole again, that loss can be restored, that light returns even after darkness. But beyond healing, the story carried another lesson. Horus, though injured, did not yield. His endurance became as important as his victories. He had faced loss, he had known weakness, yet he rose again. The trials were not only to prove his strength over Set, but to prove that he could embody the balance of Ma'at even in suffering. A ruler, the Egyptians believed, must endure not only triumphs but wounds, must lead not only in times of abundance, but in times of hardship. In this, Horus proved his worth. The gods watching these trials began to see the deeper truth. This was not only a quarrel over a throne, not only the vengeance of a son against his uncle. It was the very fabric of the cosmos being tested. Set represented chaos, the storm that breaks order, the violence that consumes. Horus represented vision, restoration, the endurance of truth. To decide between them was to decide what kind of world Egypt would be. The council felt the weight of this choice, for in their decision rested not only Egypt's future but the balance of creation itself. In the stillness of the myth, we can pause here, letting the image of Horus restored rest gently in the mind. Imagine it gleaming like the moon, serene and watchful, whole once more after being broken. For the Egyptians, the eye of Horus was not simply an eye, but the very vision of harmony, a reminder that even when torn apart, balance can be reassembled, piece by piece. It was a comfort for the living, a symbol placed upon tombs and offerings, a prayer for wholeness in life and beyond. Meanwhile, Set raged. He had wounded his nephew, but he had not broken him. He had taken an eye, but he had not silenced his claim. Each time Horus rose again, Set's fury grew sharper, his envy more consuming. He pressed the council for final judgment, demanding recognition of his power. Yet the gods hesitated, for they could not deny the resilience of Horus, the legitimacy of his claim, nor the strength of Isis' devotion. And Isis herself, though filled with love, was not without sorrow. She knew that each victory came at a cost, that each contest left her son scarred. Yet she never faltered. Her magic, her wisdom, her presence remained constant, a thread of calm woven through the storm. Her devotion became the bridge by which Horus endured, her love the shield that Set could not pierce. For the Egyptians, she embodied the eternal truth that love is not weakness, but the very source of strength. Rest, then, with this reflection. The story of Horus is not one of despair, but one of renewal. It reminds us that wounds do not end us, that brokenness can be restored, that endurance is as noble as triumph. In the quiet rhythm of the myth, it teaches that even the gods must face trials, and through those trials they grow not weaker, but stronger, more complete. And so section 16 draws to its close with calm. Horus, though scarred, stands whole once more, his eye restored, his spirit unbroken. Isis remains steadfast beside him, her devotion unshaken. The gods continue their deliberations, recognizing that what they witness is no ordinary dispute, but the eternal dance between order and chaos, truth and force, love and envy. The Nile flows, the stars shine, and destiny continues its patient unfolding. The contests between Horus and Set stretched on like the Nile itself, winding, unending, always flowing toward the horizon, yet never seeming to reach it. Years passed in the telling, for the struggle was not a single clash but a chain of trials, arguments, and battles, each one reflecting the tension between chaos and order. To those who listened, it seemed as though the gods themselves had grown weary of the conflict, as though even eternity could tire beneath the weight of endless quarrel. In the great hall where the council met, the gods gathered again and again. Ra, the sun god, presided, his golden light steady but troubled. Thoth recorded each trial, his quill scratching across scrolls with patient precision. Isis remained constant, a presence of wisdom and devotion, while Set blustered with fury and Horus endured with quiet strength. Each time they convened, the same arguments rose, Set boasting of his strength, Horus affirming his rightful claim. Each time, the gods hesitated, uncertain, unwilling to end the dispute. It is said that even Ra grew restless, for his favor leaned often toward Set. After all, Set had defended him in the heavens, striking down the great serpent Apophis that threatened to swallow the sun. Ra respected Set's ferocity, his strength against chaos. Yet Ra also saw Horus' endurance, his legitimacy as Osiris' son, his vision clear as the falcon's gaze. The sun god wavered, caught between admiration of force and reverence for truth. The Egyptians, in their quiet homes by lamplight, understood this tension well. They knew that rulers often held power not only by right but by force, not only by truth but by cunning. The struggle of Horus and Set was not distant myth alone, but a mirror of their own world, where inheritance could be disputed, where brothers might quarrel, where justice might be delayed. The weariness of the gods was the weariness of all who wait too long for balance to be restored. At times, the council attempted compromise. There are tales that Egypt was divided between them, with Set given one part and Horus another. Yet division never satisfied, for chaos cannot rest beside order, nor can legitimacy be shared with usurpation. Horus would not yield, and Set would not share. The land remained unsettled, the throne unsteady, the balance incomplete. The trials themselves became stranger as time passed. Some stories tell of contests where Set sought to humiliate Horus, to entrap him through trickery and shame. Others tell of Set attempting to wear down Horus through exhaustion, believing that the younger god's patience would eventually break. But Horus endured, always returning, always standing again. Even wounded, even tested, he would not abandon his claim. And Isis, watching, never wavered. Her presence at the council was steady as the Nile's current. When Set argued with fury, she answered with calm. When Set mocked, she countered with wisdom. At times, her cunning turned the tide, exposing his lies, unraveling his boasts. But she also bore the sorrow of delay, the ache of watching her son's trials stretched endlessly. The pain of knowing justice postponed is justice weakened. Yet she never allowed despair to rule her. For her, every day Horus endured was another day closer to destiny fulfilled. In these long disputes, Thoth's wisdom was often called upon. As keeper of records and arbiter of truth, he weighed each argument, each contest, each wound and recovery. His words were calm, measured, precise, yet even he struggled to bring the matter to conclusion. For this was not only a case of inheritance, it was the eternal question of what should govern the world: raw strength or rightful order, storm or sky, chaos or balance. Imagine the gods gathered in council after many years. Their faces are weary, their voices low. Some lean toward Horus, seeing his endurance, his legitimacy, his calm strength. Others lean toward Set, admiring his ferocity, his usefulness in defending against the powers of chaos. The hall is filled not with decision but with hesitation, the weight of indecision pressing down like a heavy stone. And in the midst of it stand Horus and Set, their rivalry unbroken, their gazes locked, neither willing to yield. The Egyptians told this part of the story slowly, as if to remind listeners that justice is often delayed, that truth must wait through many trials before it is restored. The weariness of the gods mirrored the weariness of human life, where disputes could stretch across years, where balance seemed always just beyond reach. Yet even in the delay, there was meaning. For through endurance, Horus proved his worth. Through patience, Isis revealed her devotion. Through countless trials, the truth grew clearer, like a star revealed only after the long passing of clouds. Rest now with this image. Horus, scarred but whole, standing tall despite the years of trial. Set, fierce but restless, his envy burning hotter with every passing day. Isis, calm yet vigilant, her eyes ever on her son. The gods, silent in their hesitation, the scales of Ma'at trembling between them. The Nile flows on, unconcerned with the quarrel, the stars turn above, the rhythm of the cosmos steady and eternal. And so section 17 closes not with decision, but with waiting. The gods grow weary, the trials seem unending, the dispute remains unsettled. Yet beneath the surface, destiny moves. For even the longest conflict must find its end, and the time approaches when balance will be restored. The story holds us in quiet suspense, a calm before the resolution, as though the world itself takes a slow breath, waiting for the scales to finally tip. The quarrel between Horus and Set had stretched across the years, winding on like the eternal river, sometimes fierce, sometimes still, but always unresolved. The Council of the Gods had grown restless. They had listened to arguments, presided over contests, witnessed battles and reconciliations, yet no final judgment had been reached. Each god had spoken, some for Set, others for Horus, but the balance never tipped completely in either direction. Ra, the sun god, often leaned towards Set, remembering his service in defending the solar bark against Apophis, the serpent of chaos. Ra valued strength and saw in Set the storm that could protect the order of the heavens. Yet the others saw in Horus the legitimacy of Osiris, the endurance of truth, the patience of one who had survived every trial. The council, caught between these two, hesitated, unable to resolve what seemed unresolvable. It was then that a greater voice was remembered, a voice that had not yet spoken in the council, but whose presence lingered in every word. Osiris, Lord of the Duat, God of the dead, rightful king who had been slain, still ruled from beyond. Though his body had been torn apart, though his throne in the land of the living had been stolen, he reigned in the underworld with majesty and calm. To him belonged the wisdom of the unseen, the authority of the eternal. And so, when the gods could not decide, they resolved to seek his judgment. Imagine this moment. The council sits weary, their voices trailing into silence. Thoth lays down his quill, the scrolls filled with endless records of trials and disputes. Isis lowers her gaze, her heart heavy with the long wait. Horus stands, steady yet patient, Set fuming with restless anger. Ra, lifting his golden head, at last declares, "We shall ask Osiris. Let he who first wore the crown, who now rules in the west, speak the truth that we cannot see. His word shall be final." And so messengers were sent to the Duat, the hidden realm of the dead. To reach Osiris was to cross the boundaries of life, to descend into the deep waters, through gates guarded by serpents and flames, into the halls where souls are weighed against the feather of Ma'at. There, upon his throne, sat Osiris, green-skinned, wrapped in linen, crowned with the white crown of Upper Egypt flanked by tall feathers, the crook and flail crossed upon his chest. Beside him stood Anubis, the jackal-headed guide of souls, and behind him the 42 assessors of the dead. The messengers bowed low, their voices hushed, for the realm of Osiris was solemn, eternal, filled with a stillness that no storm could disturb. They spoke of the quarrel between Horus and Set, of the council's weariness, of the countless trials that had yielded no resolution. "Lord Osiris," they said, "your son Horus claims the throne by right. Your brother Set defends it by strength. The gods cannot decide. We ask for your judgment." Osiris listened, his gaze steady, his presence calm. For him, the matter was clear as the eternal stars. "Why," he asked, "does the council hesitate? Is Horus not my son? Did Isis not guard him with her devotion, raising him in secrecy until he could stand? Did he not endure trials, wounds, and suffering, and yet return whole? And did Set not betray, murder, and seize what was not his? The truth is plain. The throne belongs to Horus. Let Egypt be restored, let the balance return, let chaos step aside." His voice carried not with thunder, but with calm authority, the kind that cannot be denied. It was the voice of judgment, the voice that weighed souls in the scales, the voice that decided the fate of all who entered the Duat. In the quiet of the underworld, there was no debate, no bluster, no delay. Osiris spoke, and the truth was revealed. The messengers returned, bearing Osiris' words. When they entered the council, the atmosphere shifted. The gods who had hesitated fell silent. Ra himself bowed his head, for even the sun must yield to the truth of eternity. Isis' eyes filled with quiet tears, not of sorrow but of relief. Horus stood still, the calm of destiny upon him. And Set, though he raged and roared, could not undo the judgment of Osiris. For once spoken, it was final. For the Egyptians who told this tale, this was a moment of great reassurance. Justice may be delayed, truth may be hidden, balance may seem lost, but in the end, it will return. Even if not in this life, it will be restored in the realm beyond, where Osiris rules. The appeal to Osiris was more than myth. It was a promise that wrongs would not endure forever, that those who wait in patience will one day see justice fulfilled. Pause here and let the image settle. Osiris enthroned in the duet, calm and eternal, his judgment restoring balance where the living gods could not. Around him the souls of the dead move in silence. The scales of Ma'at gleam with truth, and the river of time flows without haste. In this quiet vision, we hear the lesson of the myth, that in the deepest stillness, truth abides. And so section 18 closes with a turning of the tide. The gods, weary of endless dispute, sought the wisdom of Osiris, and he, with calm certainty, declared Horus the rightful heir. The long struggle was not yet over. Set would not yield easily, but the judgment had been spoken, and the end was now in sight. The Nile flows, the stars wheel above, and destiny moves steadily toward resolution. Though the judgment of Osiris had been spoken, though his words carried the weight of eternity, the struggle was not yet complete. For Set, the storm god, did not yield quietly. Chaos does not vanish in a moment, nor does pride bow at the first call of justice. Even as the council of the gods echoed with the authority of Osiris, Set's anger burned hotter than ever, a furnace of defiance that refused to be extinguished. In the hall of judgment, his voice rose in fury. He shouted against the decision, his words tumbling out like a sandstorm, fierce and blinding. I defended Ra against the serpent, he roared. I guarded the solar bark when no one else could. Strength has preserved the world, not lineage, not inheritance. Why should the throne be given to a child when I have proven my power? His eyes blazed, his body quaked with rage, but the gods did not answer. They had heard Osiris, and his verdict could not be overturned. Still, Set would not accept the silence. He raged against the council, threatened to undo their harmony, to bring storm and fire upon the land. His words fell heavy in the chamber, yet they did not sway the decision. For the truth had already been declared, and no amount of shouting could unmake it. Yet Set was not only a creature of words. He was action itself, the embodiment of disruption. Unable to overturn the judgment, he sought to resist it by force. Tales tell of his final acts of defiance, when he attempted to seize what he could, to cling to power though it slipped through his hands. Some say he fled to the desert, that harsh land of red sands and endless sky, the domain that would forever bear his name. Others say he tried once more to strike at Horus, hoping to kill the heir before the crown could be placed upon his head. But Horus was no longer a child hiding in the marshes, no longer a youth tested by endless trials. He had grown strong, tempered by suffering, sharpened by patience. When Set came against him, Horus met him not with bluster, but with calm force. Their clash shook the earth, their powers colliding like storm and sky, but this time the outcome was certain. Horus prevailed, not through trickery or sudden surprise, but with the strength of one who fights with destiny at his back. It is said that when Set was at last subdued, he was bound before the council. His struggles were fierce, but they weakened with each passing moment, as though even chaos had grown tired. The gods debated what should be done with him, for chaos could not be destroyed, nor should it. The world needed storm as well as calm, desert as well as river. Yet chaos could not sit upon the throne, could not govern in place of balance. And so Set was cast out, given dominion not over Egypt, but over the harsh deserts, the barren lands at the edges of civilization. There he would remain, feared yet acknowledged, a power at the margins, never again seated upon the throne of Osiris. For the Egyptians who told this story, Set's defeat was not an erasure. He was not destroyed, for the world required his presence. Without the desert, there is no Nile. Without storm, there is no calm. Without trial, there is no endurance. Set remained a god, but a god exiled, his power redirected, his claim denied. Horus, meanwhile, was raised up as the rightful king, his falcon eyes clear, his wings spread wide across the sky. Pause here, and imagine the scene in your mind's eye. The council chamber quiets. The gods who had hesitated now look upon Horus and nod in solemn agreement. Isis, at last, breathes with relief, her long vigil rewarded. Osiris' words echo still, the calm judgment of the duet shaping the living world. And Set, bound in chains of divine power, snarls and thrashes, but he is led away, his storm carried into the wilderness where it belongs. The Nile flows gently beyond the temple walls, the stars shine in their courses above. Balance has not yet fully settled, but the turning point has come. The storm has raged, but the sky clears, the desert wind howls, but the river continues to flow. Horus stands tall, no longer only the son of Osiris, but now the heir made manifest, the falcon who will sit upon the throne. For the listener drifting in quiet thought, the lesson of this tale is gentle yet profound. Chaos may resist, it may rage against judgment, it may strike again and again, but it cannot reign forever. Truth endures, patience prevails, balance returns. The storms of life may roar, but in time they pass, and the river flows on, steady and eternal. Let the image guide you as sleep draws closer. The desert stretching endlessly, where Set now wanders, a lonely figure in a barren land. The fertile Nile Valley, green and abundant, cradling life beneath the watch of Horus. The stars above, bearing witness, their slow turning a reminder that time moves ever toward resolution. In this vision, peace returns, softly, steadily, after the long years of quarrel. And so section 19 closes with Set's last resistance fading into exile. The judgment of Osiris stands firm, Horus has prevailed, and the world begins to breathe again beneath the wings of the falcon. The story nears its resolution, the balance long delayed finally coming into view. At last, the long years of struggle gave way to calm. The storms of conflict had passed, and though the echoes of Set's rage lingered in the distant deserts, the heart of Egypt grew still again. The judgment of Osiris had spoken, the council of the gods had yielded, and the balance of Ma'at was ready to be restored. Now it was time for Horus, son of Isis and Osiris, to ascend the throne. The ceremony of coronation was not told with clamor or noise, but with solemnity, as though the entire cosmos held its breath. Horus, who had once been hidden in the marshes, who had faced wounds and trials, who had endured mockery, struggle, and delay, now stood in his full majesty. His falcon eyes gazed across the land, his presence carrying the strength of the skies themselves. Isis watched, her heart overflowing with quiet triumph. She had waited through long nights, tended to her child in secret, woven spells of protection, and argued endlessly in council. Her devotion had never faltered, her patience never broken. Now she beheld the moment she had always believed in. Her son crowned as king, rightful heir of Osiris. The gods gathered to bear witness. Ra, though he had once leaned toward Set, now bowed his shining head, acknowledging the authority of truth over strength alone. Thoth recorded the occasion, his quill scratching out the lines of destiny. Anubis stood silently, guardian of the threshold, watching with the stillness of one who knows the value of balance. Even Set, bound and exiled to the desert, could not undo what was now unfolding. Osiris, though far away in the duet, was present in spirit. Some say his image appeared in the temple, seated upon his eternal throne, his voice whispering blessing over his son. Others say that the winds carried his approval, a murmur through the reeds along the Nile. However it was felt, the Egyptians believed that Osiris rejoiced, for the line of kingship had been restored, and his son now ruled where he once had walked. The coronation itself was rich with symbolism. Horus was crowned with the double crown of Egypt, the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, united upon his head, signifying the wholeness of the two lands. He was seated upon the throne of Horus, which was the throne of Osiris, the throne of every king who would follow. In his hands, he bore the crook and flail, symbols of kingship and order, reminders that to rule was not only to command, but also to shepherd, to guide, to protect. As Horus sat upon the throne, the people of Egypt rejoiced. Farmers along the river, craftsmen in the towns, priests in their temples, all felt the restoration of balance. The Nile flowed steadily, the stars glimmered with renewed harmony, the land grew fertile once more. For them, the myth was not distant, it was living truth. Every king of Egypt, from that day onward, was understood to be the embodiment of Horus, seated upon the same throne, continuing the same divine lineage. For those listening to the story by lamplight, drifting into drowsiness. This was the soothing resolution they awaited. The quarrels had ended. The storm had passed. The waiting had borne fruit. Balance was restored, and the falcon soared across the heavens, guarding Egypt with steady eyes. The lesson was simple yet eternal. Truth may be delayed, but it cannot be denied. Justice may be hidden, but it will rise again. Chaos may rage, but order will endure. Picture the scene slowly, as though unfolding in a dream. The temple columns rise high, their carvings telling of gods and kings. The air is filled with the scent of incense, soft and sweet, curling upward toward the sky. Horus, crowned and radiant, sits calm upon the throne, his gaze unflinching, his wings unseen but vast, stretching across the land. Isis stands at his side, her eyes filled with quiet pride. The gods form a circle around him, each acknowledging the restoration of Ma'at. The Nile murmurs beyond the walls, eternal, steady, life-giving. The stars shimmer above, their endless, turning a reflection of the balance restored below. And so the myth draws to its close. Horus reigns as king. Osiris continues to rule in the duet. Isis remains the eternal mother, and Set, though never destroyed, is banished to the desert, a reminder that chaos can never claim the throne of order. The tale of conflict becomes the tale of resolution, and the weary heart finds peace in its ending. For those who listened to the story in ancient times, this was not only myth, but reassurance. It told them that though storms might come, though injustice might rise, though chaos might delay truth, balance would always return. And for those listening now, perhaps in the stillness of night, it carries the same comfort. Whatever turmoil may swirl in the world, there is always a path back to calm, always a return to harmony. So let the story rest here, in the quiet vision of Horus enthroned, Isis content, Osiris fulfilled, and Egypt in balance once more. The river flows, the desert waits, the stars wheel above, and all things move in their eternal rhythm. The struggle has ended, the crown is restored, and peace returns at last.